also like to add that OPEC is not only working closely with its member countries, but also working very closely with the South African G20 presidency this year. Critically, this is the first time an African country has assumed this role. It's a great opportunity to highlight the developing role and influence of Africa in shaping global energy discussions. OPEC has provided the G20 presidency with 3 very detailed studies and reports to support their work. These are a study on clean cooking, analyzing LPG as a solution to secure access for clean cooking in the future. The second being a study on hydrogen, exploring its role as a part of the future global energy mix, particularly in emerging markets. The third is a study on the cost of renewables, with a comparative analysis of renewable energy cost trends and affordability mechanisms. The broad focus of these studies underscores the importance that OPEC attaches to an all energies, all technologies, and all peoples approach. It's important not to have all our eggs in one basket. We need to embrace every available energy, and we need to be realistic about what each one can really offer. And we need to develop all the technologies, including carbon capture, utilization and storage, direct air capture, which will help us all achieve our objective of reducing emissions. Allow me to conclude by saying that OPEC fully supports Africa's right to socio-economic development and poverty eradication, Africa's right to develop and monetize its own natural resources, and Africa's right to choose its own just, equitable, and inclusive future energy pathways. I wish you all a very successful conference, and thank you very much.
On stage, because we're going to go straight in. Doesn't have to then move again. So we're going to go into a panel discussion, a very interesting panel discussion on OPEC. I thank you for that beautiful introduction, and I think it's quite beautiful what you said. Can't put all our eggs in one basket, but we need to focus on the stabilization, coordination, and accelerated growth. So that's absolutely beautiful. The next discussion will be joined by His Excellency Hayden Heineken Lokpobri, Minister of State for Petroleum Resources and Oil in Nigeria. A round of applause, please, for His Excellency. We will also be joined by His Excellency Bruno Jean-Richard Itua, Minister of Hydrocarbons of Congo, Brazzaville. A round of applause, please, for His Excellency. He will be joining us shortly. And the last seat of the panelists will be taken up by Honourable Sustain Ngema, who is the Minister of Oil and Gas for Gabon. A round of applause. This conversation I normally would then, announce the moderator first, but I thought it was very fitting to announce this moderator last. He's known as the Executive Chairperson for the African Energy Chamber. To me, he's my brother, Captain of the ship, NJ Ike.
Thank you so much, Excellencies. Excellency Haikan, it's good to have you back in your second home. I think as Secretary General, you've traveled to Africa more than many other places. There's not an African OPEC member that you have not visited, not just once, but multiple times. And I remember you joining His Excellency Gabriel Mbagobian Lima when you became Secretary General. And you made your first visit was in Africa. And we thank you for doing that. In this discussion, we would like to shift a little bit. I know everybody wants to hear about everybody wants to know what's the oil price going to look like next month. I can tell you already, if you want to know, you would have to get this guy on the side, because because he doesn't do TMC. So, but we want to start with a different topic. In 2021, the IEA published a net zero scenario calling for a hard investments in new oil and gas fields. Have these net zero scenarios already impacted investment into African into oil and gas globally, as well as in our continent? You can start,
Thank you, Angie. That's a great question. And to give you a short answer, yes, they have impacted. But let me take it back a step and explain really what was the net zero scenario, since you mentioned IEA's net zero scenario. In 2021, as you said, there was a scenario issued, which was, as most of you know, a scenario that calls for reducing investments in new oil and gas. And that's not a problem, because we at OPEC also have scenarios. We issue scenarios. We have a base case, we have a scenario that could be higher or lower, and most people do that in scenario planning. The problem is when that scenario becomes the scenario. It's sold and marketed and talked about as if it's the Bible or the Quran of the energy pathway of the future. That's where the problem lies. And therefore, I believe it took prominence globally. Welcome, Your Excellency. And it became like the leading pathway for investors, for discussions in boardrooms, for CEOs of companies all around the world. And we saw many companies around the world, IOCs, you name it, changing course. And instead of focusing on investing in oil and gas, which is their core business, companies started to shift away into focusing to other sources of energy, renewables being part of it, actually moving away from their core business. So yes, definitely it has impacted investments. We've seen investments reaching record lows, talking about levels as low as 200 billion.
And how much will it take to get us back to where we should be, according to your OPEC outlook?
And OPEC's outlook, we have always called for more investments. This year's outlook, we are seeing investment requirements of around $18.2 trillion in the upstream, downstream, midstream, the whole value chain from now to 2050. That's around $700 billion per year, which is a tremendous amount of money.
But where by your projections are we set on the path to get there?
I think investments have picked up in the previous years because people have started to talk about net zero and climate change matters with more realism, with more realistic approach and sense of realism and pragmatism. And we've seen companies redirect their focus back to core business. Therefore, there's been an uptick in investments. They are still, in my view, not in the same level that they should be at. Now, the funny thing, you mentioned the IEA, let's stick with the IEA. They issued a report a week ago or 10 days ago calling for investments in oil and gas again.
There's a reason they are not here, because we're going to ask them. But maybe they heard they were coming soon.
So the new report they issued says that the upstream industry requires investments of around $540 billion per year. So it begs the question, what happened to all the previous 3-4 years where investments were undermined? We at OPEC have been advocating for investing on a regular basis, because this industry is not the industry where you can just simply switch the tap on and switch it back off. You have to invest, and you need a long lead time to invest of 5 to up to 7 years in some cases, and that requires financing and planning, and it requires clarity, because you have to give a clear signal to the industry. We have to invest today just to stay stable at current production levels, let alone to cater for the future demand growth that's happening, which in our World Oil Outlook we see demand reaching 123 million barrels a day by 2050. And unfortunately,
I'm going to stop you because I need to go to, please, we in Africa blame you for the IEA problem, because Fatih Birol left from your organization, then he went there, so you probably go fix what you created, you know. So, Senator Heineken.
That was before my time, so I'm not responsible.
Whoever time is who was there, I feel really bad for them. Senator Heineken, the Secretary General just talked about on the investment. How these scenarios that I call them voodoo scenarios on net zero. How has that investment affected an African country like yours with massive gas, massive oil potential in an effective economy, as a country as Nigeria?
Yeah, thank you very much.
I wouldn't blame you for the investment. I take note that you just came into office a few months ago.
But it's a high time I said it all. He as the controller of the records, but the secretariat, difficult more. But we can't, deny the fact that because of the wrong approach, that high investment, practically dried up, particularly in Africa. Because like I said earlier, in the opening session, it was the case where the sinner were telling the righteous man not to sin. It wasn't subsidy. So those who were responsible for the mission were not stopping the missions. The missions were continuing. And they were saying that, look, Africa, stop investing, we just bury your oil and gas assets, and then we just dash your money. The money that never came. Even if it comes, it can never. So for Nigeria, and by extension in Africa, investment practically was frozen. The same effect, may not be in the Gulf region. But the Gulf countries, have raised enormous capital so they can finance their own investments substantially. But in Africa, we're dependent, basically from financing from the West. Because, like in Nigeria, we're dominated with IOCs. 5 IOCs were there, and all of them are Western companies, Western companies. And so when the West took that decision to, reduce investment practically, affected our national income, and then it's taking a major toll, on our energy security, revolution. So that particular action is still impacting us today. And I believe that now that, the world is redirected towards, the content of the Paris Agreement that says that, look, let us reduce emissions, not abandon any source of energy. And now the IEA itself is saying that we need to, increase investment, to the tune of 540 billion per annum on upstream alone. I believe that investments, will start coming in. But I have always contended.
Which numbers do you trust? IEA is 540 or OPEC 700 billion?
Well, I don't know what figures are relevant. And I don't want to go into that dispute between the figures from OPEC, but I always trust the OPEC figures. The OPEC figures include not just the upstream, but included the upstream, the midstream, and the downstream. And I think the IEA figures were restricted to the upstream. So the figures somehow may be aligned. But, like I said earlier today, Africans have to find Africa's solution, just like the Gulf nations. And that is why we need to find a way to use the resources developed in the continent to finance upstream. If the upstream is successful, midstream will be successful, and downstream will be successful. Otherwise, we'll continue to get, the kind of results that we're getting.
I see a partner you guys bringing downstream, and you both should be very happy because they're talking about refining and downstream, which that's good. But recently, Minister Ngema, Gabon has seen some massive investment, Cape Lopez, you have decisions by GOC, and also a lot more new licenses being signed with yourself and DW and Renaissance. What is the pathway for Gabon in the near term and long term when it comes to investments in oil and gas as a competitor?
Merci. Je voudrais d'abord donner un avis personnel sur l'investissement et le fait qu'une stratégie générale était basée sur la diminution de l'investissement. Je dis c'est contraire, ne serait-ce que par rapport à ce qu'on a appelé historiquement le développement durable, qui consiste à un triangle équilatéral où le pan économique doit être au même niveau que le pan social et sans oublier les préoccupations préoccupations environnementales. Alors, ce client qui voudrait que tous les pans soient équilibrés n'a pas été respecté en Afrique. Alors, c'est qu'on a vécu une période, sinon, où on nous demande de faire de la préservation de l'environnement au détriment, évidemment, des aspects sociaux du développement économique. Alors, aujourd'hui, le Gabon est résolument décidé à relancer, à booster son développement économique et ça passe nécessairement par une nouvelle politique sur l'énergie, donc la production pétrolière et gazière. Nous, aujourd'hui, notre politique vise à intensifier la recherche au niveau de l'offshore profond et ultra profond qui nous permettra, n'est-ce pas, d'avoir une connaissance parfaite de ce que nous avons sur 72% du domaine pétrolier inexploré. Donc notre politique aujourd'hui vise effectivement à relancer la recherche afin qu'une production d'ici 2 ou 3 ans nous permette, n'est-ce pas, de stabiliser non seulement le déclin de la production qui est là depuis 1999. Ça s'explique par pas mal de choses. D'abord, cette stratégie OPEC et le manque d'investissement, mais aussi par le fait que nous avions eu un code des hydrocarbures qui n'était pas très attractif. Aujourd'hui, il est en train d'évoluer vers 2 codes différents, un code pétrole et un code gazier, dans lequel nous nous concentrons à lever tous les facteurs bloquants qui ont fait fuir à l'époque la majorité des investisseurs. Nous avons donc une nouvelle politique dans le secteur pétrolier qui nous permet aujourd'hui d'aller chercher des investisseurs parce que désormais nous sommes un pays très stable dans la sous-région et de deux, nous avons un potentiel au niveau du deepwater et qui aujourd'hui va nous amener à lancer à intensifier des recherches, faire de l'exploration et rebooster d'ici 2 ou 3 ans.
Et vous pouvez nous l'accompagner parce qu'on a écouté ce que les gens disent un peu de Congo ça. Et il y a une compagnie américaine qui a signé un très bon contrat avec vous.
Alors, je ne dirais pas qu'ils ont signé, mais les discussions vont bon train. Je pense que d'ici le 15 octobre, on va dans une signature d'RMU avec, je peux citer son nom, ExxonMobil, dont nous avions engagé des discussions depuis un bon bout de temps. Et nous pensons que d'ici moins d'un mois, nous allons signer quelque chose de très sérieux. Il n'y a pas que ExxonMobil. Nous avons également d'autres grands majors qui manifestaient l'intérêt à s'installer au Gabon. Donc, nous, l'énergie qui pendant longtemps est restée sans faire de l'exploration. Aujourd'hui, avec la nouvelle vision des nouvelles autorités, nous lançons une vaste campagne d'exploration et de recherche dans le deepwater. Et ExxonMobil va certainement signer d'ici 2 semaines et nous avons reçu des lettres de manifestation.
Total aussi va travailler dans les pompes du deepwater.
Oui, nous pensons que Total a déjà fait sa lettre de manifestation d'intérêt, je crois 20 ans après, où la recherche est complètement arrêtée au niveau de Total. Et nous avons interpellé Total dans ce sens pour leur demander de relancer la recherche pétrolière, puisque nous avons un domaine pétrolier qui est à 72% libre, où nous avons un sérieux potentiel selon les premiers indices. Donc il faut simplement affiner les recherches et être capable de dire avec exactitude ce que nous avons dans ces 72% du domaine pétrolier inexploré.
Merci. I see some of the journalists here. You guys would have to pay me for your translation because you have to take these journalists very serious. They don't learn any language except English. So Paul, shame on you, my friend. You would have to ask someone because I won't tell you anything. Minister Tour, we discussed this afternoon about new investment and also some of the projects we've seen you have done, increasing production. Does your membership in OPEC stop from driving new investment in Congo, increasing production, and carrying out new oil projects, or has been beneficial towards that?
Okay, thank you for asking me this question because
He's very nice. He's going to speak in English. Just so that Paul Walker should write it well. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Because I think some people, some opinion, they think that there is no democracy, we don't talk, we don't exchange, we don't collaborate, but in fact somebody or some people they just decide and we have to follow. It's not true because we discussed freely. Each voice in OPEC counts, has the same value, and if we don't agree in almost a consensus basis, I should say unanimous basis, we don't take a decision. So we take it, being big profit of being there is the place where you can really, that's my opinion, understand very well as all business is working. OPEC works mainly on the market. Wanting to have it the most stable possible, which is a very strong condition to make business. If you don't have stability in terms of price, how can you make a business plan? How can you make a business study? So it's very, very for us important and helpful to be there, to understand, to have a part of be part of the decision, to be a decision maker, is doing that for the world. Really, it's very exciting to be there. It's an honor for me, for the country, for Congo, small one, to be a member of OPEC. And really, any countries, you have your policy, you have your strategy, you're working with the private companies freely. You're trying to bring solutions for your country, for your population, for today, for the next generation. And OPEC, they have just to see what you're doing and put it inside, the basket of the data they have to manage. When we have to take decisions together, I think seeing more production coming from OPEC country member is good news. As you were saying that the big issue now is to bring more investment. And if the OPEC country members are bringing more investment, are bringing more production, it's very good news. It's the best way to stabilize the market. Today, the most important issue is to fight, this kind of ideology, my brother Mr. was talking about, mindset, which is just a crazy one, saying that we should stop producing oil and gas or producing fossil oil. The day we do that, the world stops working. The day we do that, I should say in a different way. The day we win, just to say that we want to do that, the world will stop working. Because the prices will become crazy, the market will collapse, and the world will stop working. And we have to do that for maybe the next 40 years. In the same time, I was listening carefully to my brother saying that African emission is around 3%. But my brother, in the same time, Africa is a place which is capturing better than anyone in the world because of the forest and other things capturing carbon. This is the best, we are the best one to do that. So in fact, I think we are net zero today. The emission is 3%, but capturing more than 3% by the Congo Basin, forest, and so and so and so. So we are a very good example of continent, very good one. We should be the first one to be allowed to produce more and more. In the same time, we are producing for our country only, not only for our population. We mainly produce and export what we have. That means that somebody is interested by buying what we produce. Somebody, not one, but everyone is interested. I didn't have any information saying that African country put on the market and didn't find a buyer. No. So there is a market, there is demand, and the demand requires for us to produce more and more and more. So today, for example, Congo, we have already announced in 5 years we will double our production. We will come from 20, the first news for Secretary, I'm sorry, I didn't get it. We are going from 268,000 barrels a day to 500,000 barrels a day in 5 years.
I want to stop you there, Secretary General. Do you have, does OPEC has any policy against Congo doubling its production?
I don't know. I don't know why we would even raise this kind of, even a hypothetical question.
Are we stopping oil?
Maybe you are planning to. Not OPEC, definitely. No, I think what is, if I may, to build on what His Excellency is saying, that if we were to even think, or the world were to think, that we should stop oil, the world would stop. You look at everything you have, it contains oil. Even medicines, syringes in hospitals, operating rooms, food chains, transportation, you name it. These mics we have on us here, everything contains petroleum or petroleum-derived products. And it's the most easily transportable, it's affordable, it's abundant. So I think the question about stopping oil production is not a question to be discussed at all. Now, add to that, which maybe I didn't touch upon, the importance of what His Excellency is saying. For example, Congo's plans, and rightfully so, their plans to increase their production to 500, 600, whatever the country can do in the future, because there is going to be growing demand. Nigeria as well, Gabon as well, my own country, Kuwait, all the OPEC members and all producers want to increase their production because the world is going to grow. We're going to have 2 billion people more on the planet by 2050. We're going to have the global economy is going to double in size compared to what it is today. We're going to have rapid urbanization growth. From now to 2030, which is only 4.5 years from today, you're going to have at least 500 million, 500 million people around the world moving to new cities. Imagine, 500 billion people moving to create new cities around the world. I don't know what the population is of Cape Town, but for example, I was just in London. London is 10 million. You're talking about 50 cities the size of London. 50 new cities around the world the size of London. If London is 10 million, simple mathematical. So, sorry, just to say, can we imagine together what kind of energy is going to be required to fuel all of that? And again, it's not just oil, it's not gas, it's going to be all sources of energy. This is our approach, and I think it's very reasonable, it's very fair. And for all those talking about energy transition being replacing oil and gas, energy transition has never been about replacing sources of energy. Honestly, wood is still being used, coal is being used, and at record levels every year. Oil keeps hitting new records every year, and gas continues to rise every year. And renewables is also catching up, but renewables is starting from a very low base. So the world is going to need to invest not only in oil and gas, but in all sources of energy. And to deal with climate change and the issues of climate change, we have to invest in all the technologies possible to deal with reducing the emissions.
Thank you, Excellency. But I wanted to shift a little bit, and I hope you keep it crisp. I need to ask this question, and I think for most people in this room, for most Africans, it's so important for them. We've seen you do a lot of work with G20 around clean cooking. We're still at a continent where almost 1 billion don't have access to clean cooking. Where does OPEC stand? And I think maybe all the ministers will discuss this with the Secretary General on working on getting access to clean cooking through LPG to Africans. Because at the end, all this investment means nothing if everyday people can get basic access to clean cooking technologies and LPG to really improve our living standards.
So, if I may just start, maybe, Your Excellency, if you allow me. I think we have many countries within OPEC. Let me just take an example of our biggest member country, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has a clean cooking program.
Aujourd'hui, nous estimons qu'il faut à peu près 15 à 20 gigas à trouver nécessairement avant 2029. Et ça, nous potentiel gazier qui peut nous apporter, n'est-ce pas, le gaz nécessaire pour pouvoir alimenter la transformation des minerais sur place au niveau du Gabon. Mais en termes de ménage, nous n'avons pas aujourd'hui, vous savez, notre population, on est à peine 2 millions d'habitants, et nous n'avons pas encore de problème de gaz au niveau des ménages. Mais ça ne saurait tarder puisque la population est croissante et nous comptons sur le potentiel gazier. C'est pour cela d'ailleurs que nous voulons intensifier la recherche pour essayer d'identifier les nouveaux champs gaziers qui peuvent être mis en exploitation le plus rapidement possible. Donc nous comptons beaucoup sur le gaz et nous n'avons pas l'intention, même pas un peu, de ne pas de recevoir les leçons des gens qui vont nous demander de limiter l'exploitation. Le gaz d'ailleurs, c'est une énergie propre, c'est vrai, et qui n'a rien à voir avec l'énergie au fioul. Donc nous allons intensifier effectivement les recherches sur tout ce qui concerne l'énergie gazière. Nous avons déjà un potentiel, nous allons les exploiter. Nous avons juste simplement besoin des investisseurs qui nous accompagnent là-dedans. Dans la recherche et en plus nous avons déjà le Kéra qui fait le nécessaire pour produire le gaz. Il vient de mettre en place une centrale dans le sud du Gabon, le Manuma, qui produit aujourd'hui 8 à 9 mégawatts à partir d'une centrale thermique qui a remplacé évidemment une centrale thermique en fioul. Et nous allons multiplier ces exemples pour avoir une énergie plus ou moins propre. Sans explorer, alors que nous avions un domaine pétrolier libre à près de 72%. La question c'est pourquoi nous en sommes arrivés là. La réponse est claire, nous avions un code des hydrocarbures qui n'était pas très attractif. Nous évoluons aujourd'hui, ce code-là, les hydrocarbures, va donner naissance à deux codes, un code pétrolier et un code gazier, dans lequel nous avons identifié effectivement des facteurs bloquants, comme par exemple le bonus de signature, que nous avions enlevé donc tout ce qui est exploration en deep water. Et nous avons aussi décidé d'adapter la fiscalité en fonction du risque en deep water, ce qui va favoriser, n'est-ce pas, et attirer les investisseurs au niveau du Gabon. Mais le gaz reste notre principal espoir pour, n'est-ce pas, non seulement développer notre industrie qui voudrait être localisée à partir de 2029. Donc le gaz est très important pour nous et donc nous devons intensifier la recherche dans le domaine pétrolier, surtout dans le deep water.
Merci, monsieur le ministre. Je pense que c'est très important qu'Amel est ici et Christophe, il faut mettre l'argent. On ne peut pas les gens qui passent seulement. François aussi, il faut signer une chèque. Hein? Monsieur le ministre est ici, il est préparé à signer. Pour ne pas notre discussion qu'on va faire. Si tu ne signes pas, Christophe, on va enlever votre visa, on ne prend pas au chantier.
Là, il faut beaucoup d'efforts, il faut le reconnaître. Il faut encore faire plus.
C'est mieux. Toi aussi, vous travaillez beaucoup avec Carenco, tu as fait beaucoup de projets chez toi aussi, on entend les signatures. Mais j'ai une question, monsieur le ministre. Vous avez travaillé beaucoup avec Winois, avec un projet de RPG pour l'Afrique. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous expliquer ça en anglais ou en français, si vous voulez?
Je peux parler en français?
C'est bien, c'est bon pour toi.
Il faut en passant quand même. On a beaucoup parlé. J'ai envie de dire à NG que une des beautés de Africa Energy Week, c'est qu'on parle d'énergie en général, et pas seulement de pétrole et de gaz. Et en parlant d'énergie, pendant les 4 éditions précédentes, il y a une chose qu'on a beaucoup appuyée, c'est la sécurité énergétique. Mais quand on dit sécurité énergétique, pour moi, ce n'est pas suffisant parce que ça peut être couvert par des chiffres globaux, par des ratios. J'aime mieux quand NG parle d'éradiquer la pauvreté énergétique parce qu'à ce moment-là, on parle des citoyens. Et je crois qu'on doit garder ça, absolument. Le gaz moderne de cuisson, ça a été dit, chez nous au Congo, au milieu de la forêt, avec apporter le butane comme solution pour la cuisine, c'est éliminer la première cause de destruction de la forêt. C'est la biomasse. C'est le charbon de bois, c'est le bois de chauffe. C'est ça la première cause. Donc quand on apporte le gaz aux populations, on protège la forêt et c'est le premier puits de carbone du monde aujourd'hui, la forêt du bassin du Congo. Donc il faut mettre tout ça dans la même thématique de éradiquer la pauvreté énergétique. Ce n'est pas possible. Aujourd'hui, au XXIe siècle, il y a encore tant de personnes qui manquent d'énergie, quelle que soit la forme. Il manque d'énergie moderne. Ça devrait devenir un droit fondamental humain. Ça devrait être dans les objectifs du millénaire de développement. Pour ce qui concerne le Congo, nous avons beaucoup de chance parce que le LPG, il nous est fourni par la raffinerie, il nous est fourni par le champ de Kosa. Ce n'était pas suffisant, on importait. Aujourd'hui, il pourra nous être fourni par le projet Marine 12, il ne va pas faire que de gaz liquéfié, qui fera aussi du LPG. Mais surtout, nous avons ce partenaire, Ouïghois, qui produit surtout de l'huile et du gaz associé. Dans mon pays, depuis 2007, c'est interdit de torcher. Interdit de torcher. Nous avons renforcé ça en 2022 avec des sanctions financières quand on torche. Donc tout le monde est obligé de transformer le gaz, de le valoriser, de le monétiser. Et donc, oui, moi qui torchais 1,5 million de mètres cubes par jour, a été sommé de trouver un projet. Avec l'augmentation, ils vont passer à 5 millions de standards mètres cubes par jour de gaz disponible. On leur a dit, il est hors de question que vous torchiez ça. Donc, ils ont monté un projet avec lequel ils vont produire 100 000 tonnes de butane par an. Aujourd'hui, nous consommons 40 000 tonnes de butane qui va s'ajouter à celui de la raffinerie, à celui de Kosa, à celui de Marine 12. Nous sommes déjà exportateurs de butane, puisque dans la période de test, Ouïghois a déjà envoyé une ou deux expéditions en Namibie. Mais avant, c'est maintenant 100% d'accès au gaz, 100% d'accès au gaz pour tous les citoyens qui le souhaitent et 100% d'accès à l'électricité. C'est nos deux objectifs. Et ça devrait être l'objectif pour l'Afrique tout entière. 100% d'accès, 100% d'accès au gaz, 100% d'accès à l'électricité. Et pourquoi pour l'Afrique? Parce qu'on a assez de gaz. L'Afrique a assez de gaz pour elle. Si l'Afrique arrête d'exporter, il va y avoir des excédents. L'Afrique a assez de gaz pour l'électricité, assez de gaz pour le cooking gas. Donc, c'est un objectif qu'on devrait se fixer. Donc, nous, aujourd'hui au Congo, nous pensons que dans les 2-3 années à venir, le marché gazier national va être complètement transformé. Parce qu'on a 5 fois la consommation aujourd'hui. Il faut des sociétés pour stocker, il faut des sociétés pour transporter, il faut des sociétés pour distribuer. Il faut construire des dépôts partout. On est très intéressé par les expériences, je n'ai pas honte de le dire, l'expérience ivoirienne et sénégalaise. Parce qu'il y a 20 ans, ils ont lancé ce défi-là. Ils ont des taux d'accès qui sont très importants. Je crois que le Gabon et le Cameroun sont en train d'emprunter le même chemin. Donc nous, on ira voir ailleurs comment ça se passe. On ne peut pas vendre de gaz de butane comme on vend. C'est pas possible. Il faut être imaginatif, s'adapter au marché local, travailler avec les commerçants, avec le réseau existant, les petites boutiques, en faire des dépôts. Il y a des choses qui ont été faites. Il faut fabriquer les bouteilles sur place. Et on ne va pas encore importer les bouteilles, ça n'a pas de sens. Il faut faire des bouteilles de 20 kg, de 12 kg, de 5 kg, de 3 kg, de 1 kg, de demi-kg, pour que on s'adapte au panier de la ménagère, pour que la plus pauvre des familles, entre guillemets, j'espère qu'il n'y en a pas beaucoup encore, il y en aura de moins en moins, puisse acheter même la petite bouteille de gaz. Il faut faire la promotion de ce qui fonctionne au gaz. Le réchaud au gaz, le réfrigérateur au gaz, le climatiseur au gaz, la lampe au gaz. Il faut faire la promotion aujourd'hui. Nous avons de quoi faire tout ça et c'est le programme que le Congo a désormais.
Merci, Monsieur le ministre. Before we go, quería pedirle al viceministra de Venezuela que está con nosotros. Por favor, please stand. Por el equipo Venezuela, por favor. Gracias por venir aquí. Estamos muy contentos para ver todos vosotros. founding member of this organization, and before we get to its 65th anniversary, Excellency, I wouldn't be led to leave this room if I don't ask you this question. So I'm going to ask you. Looking beyond 2026, what strategies is OPEC considering when it comes to managing oil supply and demand, particularly in the context of increasing competition from OPEC and non-OPEC producers and the global push towards cleaner sources of energy?
As I maybe indicated in some of my earlier statements and comments, we always take a longer-term view about the global market, trends, trajectories for growth, and based on that we plan our strategies both within our member countries, but also as a Secretariat we advise our member countries on what projections will be like in the future. So beyond 2026, I think we're talking more on the medium to longer term. So for us, as I said, we see the global population rising from now 8 billion to 10 billion. And most of that growth is going to be in Africa and then the rest of the developing world in Asia. And younger populations require the luxuries that we all take for granted. Some of us take for granted in many parts of the world. Urbanization that I spoke about also having this impact. And the economy is set to grow with trade and everything flowing and flourishing. So that means that the world's going to require about 23% more energy in 2050 than it is consuming today. And therefore, OPEC, when we put strategy, when we put directions to our countries, we keep repeating the key word, which I stressed on in my statement, and I think you heard all their excellencies saying. It's the importance of investing today to be ready for that day in the future, beyond 2026, as we say. So we are clear in that respect that OPEC, our member countries, have to be ready to be able to supply that demand when it comes about in the future. And it's not a matter of when, if, it's a matter of when it's going to come about. I think in our projections we're very clear with the timelines, our views, and I think I'm really happy to say that we're seeing many more people with a very similar approach to OPEC's views and about the long-term trajectory for demand growth. Maybe not identical, of course, and there must be variations and differences, but obviously all pointing towards the same trajectory for growth in the future. And we've been saying this for many years, advocating this for many years. I remember when I first came here in 2022, I was probably the only one saying that we need to invest in a world saying we need to invest. Actually, as His Excellency Itwa mentioned, we were in a world where people were saying stop using oil and gas, keep it under the ground. You all remember, Your Excellencies. Today, the tone is changing. And we're really happy to see the importance of a more realistic approach towards energy future, because if we don't prepare today for what's coming in the next couple of years, I think the world's going to have some serious problems. Today, people talk about the limitations on spare capacity already. Imagine what's going to happen in the future when more demand comes about. So I think we have to be clear-minded, we have to be setting our strategies very clear and laser focused on the objectives that are coming in the future based on very clear projections and based on what's happened historically. There is no way around it. There is growth, and growth means that you have to be ready to supply, and that means you have to be more to work.
I think we're running out of time. I just want to have a last round, less than 30 seconds. It's very hard to get the politicians to be less than try. Senator Heineken. 65, OPEC celebrating 65 years. Where do you see these organizations, each partnership with Africa, going over the next 65 years?
Well, I think, OPEC's relationship with, OPEC member countries will continue to grow. And I believe that it's better for us to remain, as members of the OPEC, strategic members of OPEC. But if you don't belong to OPEC, you belong to another group that is OPEC groups. And it's good for everybody, to belong to OPEC, for the purpose of, price stability, sustainable supply. say that anyway. Nigeria as a country has a huge market, for fossil fuel. Today, Dangote's refinery needs about 650,000 barrels a day. What is building another one that's going to be 250,000 barrels. That's already 1 million. The existing refineries owned by NNPC altogether is another 450,000 barrels a day. And then if you look at the modular refineries we have in the country, we're having a refining capacity that will be in excess of what we currently produce, inclusive of condensate. So certainly, as the population is growing, as he said, demand certainly will grow. As of today, Dangote produces maybe 40% of what we need locally. So the rest is imported. Dangote and the refiners produce maybe about 40%. We import the rest 60% of refined products to be able to meet that. And so, certainly, as demand increases, we also have to take steps. We have to make investments that will grow our production to meet both our local demand and then our international obligations. I think it's important for me to make this point.
Thank you, Excellency. Mr. Lebanese, where do you see Gabon and OPEC going in this relationship in the next 65 years?
Merci. Je voudrais d'abord dire que le Gabon est membre actif de l'OPEC et nous allons continuer et travailler de concert avec cet organisme que nous pensons très indispensable pour le secteur.